to the channel. Glad to have you with me today. We have a special Chalk Talk session. Well, they're all special, so I'm excited about this one. As we talk about live streaming and the state of change for 2020, and as we go into 2021, which is this is December, just not that long away, far from us, there are changes in terms of what we look at in production and live streaming. So if you're new to live streaming, welcome to the channel. If you've been doing webcast production, tech director, welcome to the channel as well. And we're going to talk with EasyLive.io today. We're going to talk about production in the cloud and actually taking the production switcher and moving it in to a cloud process. So let's bring in Michael. And before I forget, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you get notified, subscribe, and you get notified when you ring the bell when I post a video. And we really want your comments and feedback. I think Michael and from EasyLive.io will be excited to hear some feedback from you. So we want to hear your feedback. I want to hear your feedback. Okay, let's bring Michael into the conversation. Hey, Michael.
Hello, John.
How are you doing? Welcome to the session. Glad to have you with us today. Maybe let's just take a moment and let you introduce yourself formally and maybe introduce EasyLive.io.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, John. It's a pleasure. So I'm Michael, sales director at EasyLive.io. I've been with this company for a bit more than a year now. And I come from the esports industry. So I was, tournament organizer and production director on some international events before and on esports. And now EasyLive.io is a cloud-based technology for live production. And so I believe this is the right solution for esports, but also for a lot of digital shows and all kind of productions that we can talk about during this session.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's been no lack of discussion or dialogue in this year, especially given the change that we know in the not only in the live streaming production, kind of where you've come from and where I've come from, and how we've seen the elevation of online video and where it's at today, obviously because of the pandemic. But as we see this, what I've told some people, some kind of an inflection point, if you will, right? As we look at the state of 2020, a lot of my discussions with other organizations and other folks has been about, what is the state of change? How are things migrating in terms of media online and technology? Maybe take a few moments and share from your perspective, where have you, in terms of EasyLive.io, seen the changes in terms of what, let's say, the webcast producer, something like myself, or maybe in a tech director role, different elements because of the pandemic that we've had to modify kind of the workflow of what we're doing?
Sure. Yeah, so even before the pandemic, actually, there was a trend, a change that was going on, especially in the esports and the traditional sports industries, because people don't necessarily want to travel every time for a one single day event or something like that, because it implies a lot of travel, sleeping in another bed, in a hotel room, etc., etc. So
Yes.
you know the idea. So and so people were looking, for ways of producing live content from home or from anywhere they already were. So, and instead of moving, a lot of hardware around the world, maybe we could have, solutions for some use cases that make sense, and you could control your live production from anywhere. And that's exactly what EasyLive.io is all about. And with the pandemic, obviously, we were forced to stay home. So that put a lot of pressure on those use cases because everyone suddenly had no access to control rooms or to physical studios. So we needed to find ways to solve a lot of challenges during 2020. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I know from my perspective, from my point of view, just, limited in terms of what I was handling, but, we were doing large events at stadiums and multiple broadcasts. And I think to your point, absolutely. We saw some changes occurring pre-pandemic, and we saw kind of the state. I think the pandemic kind of accelerated, obviously, the necessity of transitioning some of these. I almost look at it from a work function, if you will, and looking at different options that we be able to do our production. So as we think about, looking at, and obviously because of the change, and we've seen that the virtual events, the different elements now with online video when it comes to how we manage that from a production, and looking at reducing the capital cost expenditure, if you will. I'll use that kind of a business term for a moment, in terms of the hardware and all the pieces that build that, and that it takes to do that. Now it's more about optimizing. And as we look to optimize this, one element that you guys provide, well, two, I would say. One is the lower latency, and what we mean by that is more real-time video interaction for esports or sporting event, maybe the interaction with fans. We've got virtual events. Is that an area, obviously you guys have a feature of the product. Maybe talk about that area of where you see that occurring more because of the requirement from clients or whomever, right, to deliver on that.
Yeah, totally. So digital shows, is a need and was a need before the pandemic, and even more now. So people talking about, any subject. So you need to have access to an expert, whatever the subject is, and that expert cannot necessarily be with you physically. So you need to somehow, connect several people together. So we already had a solution there for people willing to connect and have a chat remotely. And then we thought, and because of the sports industry that needed to, play matches, or in the soccer, it started with the Premier League in the UK. They told us, hey, we need to have some live audience to make sure that our players will be joyful and cheered thanks to this audience, because stadiums were closed for that audience because of the pandemic. So what we brought our solutions to make sure that we could gather several hundred of people, or several hundreds of people sharing the same live experience in the lowest latency possible, so in real time. And what we achieved, I believe, was amazing with our technical partners, High Vision, with a round trip low latency as low as 150 milliseconds. So from the control room in the stadium to the homes of everyone back to the control room in the stadium, 150 milliseconds to get the reactions and emotions of the fans whenever there was a nice action played in the field.
Yeah,
so that's what the fan wall is all about.
That's fantastic. And I think for those that may be viewing, and when you watch this, for everybody that's watching this video, Michael's really hitting on an area. Going back in time just for a moment, when I was dealing with, he mentions High Vision, who is another media delivery type partner in the industry, delivering encoders for live streaming, and one of their key technologies that they brought to market. And for those of you that don't know much about this, you can go back to one of my other videos where I talked to Suso from High Vision, talking about SRT. What we're talking about is the ability to provide reliability in our streams, right? And delivering that. And I was, when Michael and I first started talking, I shared with my experience, my early days with SRT, of where we were doing a large event at AT&T Stadium in Dallas Cowboys Stadium in Texas. And we had to have a link back from the event back to where I was at the broadcast facility in Riverside. And the one option we had was, the first option was go with satellite. That didn't work when the satellite provider that we were working with changed the transponder code the day before, but didn't tell us about that. So our backup option was SRT with the Makito product. And so, this is like a couple hours out, an hour out from the event. The satellite vendor, we're trying to find out. He said, the guy talked to the guy. He says, turn the dial exactly 90 degrees or something like that. And I'm on a ladder, and I'm like, he says, you won't know until you get the signal. And I'm like, okay, I don't know, you know. So I do it. That didn't work. And so we had a cable already set up for the Makito and the SRT to pull that with that reliability. And so the way I explained this, and I told Michael about this in our conversation, but for Michael, may remember this, is if anybody remembers Back to the Future, where the professor's on the top of the tower and the clock trying to get that, as Marty McFly is trying to hit the 88 miles an hour in the DeLorean. I was trying to pull this cable, and I'm no kidding. Seconds are going by, and the event has started, and the pre-show has started, and they're in the video team behind me saying, we need video, and I'm trying to get the cable. So needless to say, once about an hour later, after my heart had kind of settled down, and that was unbelievable. So, you know, Michael, you bring up a good point, is, you know, that's one of the areas of building better reliability in terms of the streams, of the technology. And you guys have done a great job of doing the integration with SRT, providing it as an option, providing a new level of, you know, I would say, value and benefits when it comes to being able to pull this all together and provide that in a way that's reliable, right? And obviously test and validation is key to that process, as we know, for those of us in production. But certainly that, I think, adds another level of you know, foundation to that process. So we talked about low latency. We talked about interaction audience, which is fantastic. I saw the video and the little write up on the fan wall with the soccer league, and I encourage people to go check out at easylive.io's site. They have actually a overview write up on that, and it was pretty fantastic. And so as we talk about that, we look at interviews, we look at virtual events. One of the other areas I think that's come up for this year in 2020 has been a playback, right? And kind of like, almost like a TV production, right? Where we're pre-capturing the content, and then we're uploading it, and then we're playing that back as a simulated live stream. That's another area of your feature of your product that you provide as well, correct?
This is correct. Yeah. So because, for instance, in the sports industry, for a while between March and June, I would say there was no sports in most of the countries because everything was on hold. And so, what best to keep, you know, your fans or your audience engaged is just playing back old matches and have captains or good players, you know, comment on top of those matches so they could relate, you know, and tell the stories about what they felt at that time. So that was very compelling for the audience, because they had to see their perspective, you know, instead of, you know, it was not live, it was not real life, so everybody knew it. It was just a replay. But because and thanks of those players, the captains telling their stories about how they felt at that time, it did add a value on top of whatever the content was. So this is a great example where playback capabilities are very essential to create some compelling content.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that I've evaluated on my own earlier in the year when we were looking at how we deliver a continuous broadcast of sorts in terms of simulated live streams. And that's, I think, a key part of your solution that is so needed now as another option, right? And I kind of explained to everybody, I think, you know, we've talked about that several times, is that, you know, it's kind of a tool bag, right? And the tool bag of sorts is being able to provide those sets of options that we can validate, yes, we can do this, you know, and how that all kind of functions. And just so everybody knows, I'm actually taking it and evaluating EasyLive.io myself, because I'm looking at it from the perspective, as well as Michael is so graciously sharing his time. And we're going to go in part 2 in discussing the element of, okay, how would I run this, right? I think there's a part of where we have the dialogue and the theories and all these things, you know, that we talk about in terms of the process, workflow, tools, what have you. Now we need to go in and actually show people how this works. And I think that's going to be something I'm very excited about in part 2. Jumping back just for a moment in terms of the use cases, and what I would use an example for everybody is, where do you see the value, the best fit? And I'm sure it's horizontal, so it fits a lot of different areas. Where do you, from your perspective, see the best fit for EasyLive.io for somebody in terms of where they may be at in terms at a broadcast level, and where it provides, a real value to them and what their need is?
Sure. So any types of digital shows, okay, where you don't necessarily have, 10 or 15 cameras at the same time on the same subject. Okay, obviously, there will always be cases where local production and hardware switcher will be necessary. Okay, we are not here to replace those. This is not the case. We are here to add value on top of whatever the local production could be, or we are here to create fully cloud-based production when it makes sense. Okay, so as long as you have, a couple of live sources that you need, they are not necessarily on the same subject, and then you need to switch between those live sources, add some overlays, lower thirds, logos, play back some videos, either in a playlist so that it's automated. You just hit play and you let it go for an ad break or whatever. So that's that. Those are the kind of use cases where it makes sense to get a cloud-based technology and cloud-based production. And then if you have a local production, because in your case it makes sense, there's still a value to use a hybrid solution that I call, because you can push your final production into Easy Live, and then we keep your live feed alive no matter what happens locally. So this is a security that you can get from us, and we make sure to deliver whatever we need to deliver to all your destinations. So if you have a crash locally or a disconnect for whatever reasons, we can deliver a slate or a video or even another live source to all your destinations, so that there is no disconnection from your audience, and so you're not losing your audience at that time. Because if you're depending only on a local setup, and if something happens, your show is gone and your audience will go away. This is guaranteed. So that's why we can help even, local productions to secure their feed into the cloud.
Absolutely. No, I think that's phenomenal. And I think to your point, yes, you're right. It's an added value to your existing process if you have a contribution fee that you want to send up. And I think that we're going to dive into that part 2 and kind of talk through some of the features and really kind of walk people through what that would look like in terms of what we've done. And that is, we're going to take my environment, put it on EasyLive.io, and show how this would work. Now, this is one perspective. I think from the production, I think you're right. The interesting part that you brought up and the point you're making is that, and for everybody to understand, is what Michael's referring to, and I've said the same thing, is that, if we are in a situation where we're limited because of social distancing, the pandemic, we have to think a new way of thinking is remote production team. So if we can't have it, or we have a team that maybe is a skeleton type crew, right, that can provide that and get the contribution up. What we're really doing is leveraging kind of the breadth and depth of the cloud architecture or infrastructure. And when I explain to everybody, is think of a building and making sure that we can do that. So in terms of delivery, so I think you bring up a really excellent point about that, is not only is it having the value of your equipment, whether it's Blackmagic, Ross, or New Tech, or whatever, or elemental encoders, from a contribution perspective, meaning we're sending a feed up to EasyLive.io, but we're also taking advantage of the fact that EasyLive.io is providing again, as Michael said, security in terms of reliability, right? And I like to use the term resiliency in the sense that, right, in a way we can think about that just as a good network, a solid network that has good redundancy and resiliency in its architecture. And we depend upon a lot of the network infrastructures today. And so that's an important part of that. So excellent. This is fantastic. Well, Michael, I want to thank you. As we kind of wrap up part one, we're going, for everybody online, we're going to do another session. It'll be a separate video. It'll be part 2. And that's where Michael's going to walk us through. We're going to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive, which I think is going to be very beneficial of how does it work, and really kind of take what Michael shared today with us and what we've discussed and translate that into an actual walkthrough. And so hopefully everybody will be excited about that. So Michael, thank you as we wrap up part 1. And
thank you, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot to do a shout out to Michael. He's in so my family heritage in Canada on my mom's side, who's Canadian. He's up in Canada, and so I love Canada. She's from the British Columbia province, and so Michael and I've actually shared a little bit about some Canadian stuff since he's there and doing that.
That's correct.
So thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Stay safe, stay well, and we look forward to bringing you part 2. And Michael and I will be doing that. And again, feedback. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave your comments. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.